Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo, and today I am here with Justin Shaw, and I am really excited to delve down his journey today. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, and thank you for letting me be here, there, everywhere. I don't know, magic of the internet.
Absolutely. So, who would you say Justin is at the core?
Well, it depends on which point in my life you'd be asking. Right now, I like to identify kind of as a sorcerer, which is something I suppose we'll probably get into. But, it's been a long journey, and it's been an appreciative journey. And I'm really grateful to be where I am, because what I've been through makes where I am extra special, and where I'm going even more special. So, the past does not have to define us or to be who we are, right? But it can absolutely be, it needs to be a part of us. And there's appreciation from where I've been to where I'm now to where I'm going. And I understand things that have happened, certainly. So that's kind of a very cryptic answer.
Well, speaking of the past, can you tell us a little bit about upbringing, your childhood dynamic, however deep you want to take that?
We don't want to get into deep specifics because pain is pain, right? What you've been through, what I've been through, what any listeners have been through. There's one thing we share in common: pain is pain. And we are very spiritual beings trapped in a very physical world. And that is something that unites us all. It's important to know that there's sympathy as empathy, and sympathy is someone who listens to your pain. Empathy is someone who can feel it with you. And it's important to know that I have empathy for people. My childhood was just a quick kind of Clip Notes version. It was a very it was an emotional vacuum, essentially, living up in my childhood. It was just me and my mom. My dad was around when I was young, but there were problems in the marriage. He was doing his own thing. And so it was just me and my mom. And she had her own issues, and it was a very isolating place to grow up in. Very isolating. She wasn't the type who would leave me with other people, and physically she was present, but emotionally she was absent. So, she would go to her room, and most of our time spent, I wouldn't say we didn't spend any time together, because we did. We'd go out together and maybe we'd have dinner or something. She hated to cook. So several times a week, we go out to dinner. So we'd have our time together. Most of the time in the house, we'd be separate. I'd be doing my own thing. She'd be doing her thing. And that's just how it was. And there were no brothers and sisters around. So it was a very emotionally isolating way to grow up. And so I gravitated towards pop culture of time period, which was kind of the 90s. That was kind of the time to grow up in. And that's what made me happy. That's the comedy of that time period, the SNL, the Jim Carrey movies, and Adam Sandler, and, all these amazingly funny people. That's what I gravitated towards. So, that's what took away my pain. This was a household where the word love was not mentioned. There wasn't any hugging or any sort of thing. My mother was dealing with her own pain at the time. And, she is just a product of her environment. I blame nothing for her. I love her very much. She's been passed on now. But she did the best she could. And, looking back at her childhood, and I could see, my parents are much, much older than I am. They were 42 when they had me, both of them. So they had brothers and sisters, but they were much, much older. So they were moved out by the time I was around. So it was just us two. And her mother was the only grandparents I met. So there were 4 grandparents, 3 were dead. Her mother was the only one I met. And speaking of pop culture, give her watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Mac's mom, this was my grandmother. She was a chain smoking, constant drinking, come give your granny a kiss, that kind of grandmother. That was my grandmother. And that's the only grandparent I knew. So if that's who raised my mom, I get it. Right. So, she did the best she could, but it just wasn't enough. If you do not tell your child you're special, you're valued, you're loved, they're going to look for the world for these things. And the world is always going to tell them they're not special, they're not loved, they're nothing. So that's what happened with me. And this led to teens, 20s of just dumpster fire. It was just a dumpster fire. Drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever, anything to take me out of feeling who I am. But comedy was the one thing that was there. That was the one healthy thing. I found all these other unhealthy things once I hit the teenage years. The comedy was really helpful in my grade school and everything, but then I latched on to these things, and that's what took me. And that's the way it was for quite a while until I hit my 30s. And I went to rehab. So I had my first rehab, and that was late 20s. And I just figured, you go to rehab and you clean out and things are fine, right? My problem is that I have these withdrawals. They're physical withdrawals, and I can't get past 1-2 days. And that's my problem, right? Like if I can just get past these physical withdrawals. And so the first rehab, I did that. And I got through, and they were telling me all these things, like you need more than this. It's more than just drying out. There's more to it, and blah, 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 blah. I wasn't listening. I didn't give a shit, like whatever. So that lasted about not even 3 months, which is surprising. It even went that long. And then after that, I was out for quite a while. And so I realized that, okay, so there's something to this. There's something to this addiction thing. There's something to this depression thing. There's something to this anxiety thing that I'm not getting. And it's not just a bodily thing. So I go back for a second time. And that was back in LA. LA was the first time I was doing my stand-up comedy thing, which was a complete failure because apparently to be a stand-up comedian, you need to make it through a set standing up, which was not something I was capable of doing at that time. So I came back home to Arizona and was like, okay, all right, let's try this the real way. And I decided let's actually go for this. Let's see, what are they talking about? Like, what do you mean it's more than a bodily thing? Like, I wasn't really into that whole hippy dippy spiritual thing. And so I go to rehab and do what they say. And what they say there was kind of more of a Christian approach, which was a faith-based center. And so the whole thing there was like, I found this kind of amazing feeling, and it's like, okay, all right, this Christian thing, all right, let's give this a try, this AA thing, let's give this a try, which I didn't care to before. And they really go hand in hand together because honestly, AA is kind of disguised Christianity. So they really are peanut butter and jelly. So I do them both and it works. It works for a time. It's just, the thing was, Christianity and is this very subset of Christianity, this deep subset. It's not quite as in any arena as the Christianity, but Christianity to me just seemed like this big fancy mansion, right? Like this big, you've got 9 rooms and, like 14 bathrooms, and there's a theater and there's a basketball court and there's all these amazing things in this mansion, right? But the thing about living in the mansion is you can't go outside the mansion. You can't investigate outside the mansion, right? Like, because that's all they tell you. There's a zombie apocalypse out there and you can't investigate. So I lived in that mansion for 6 years, and I realized that mansion is actually built on a cracked foundation of fear and judgment. And so it started to crumble around me. And that point was my mother's death. Terminal, when you get diagnosed, a terminal illness, it's a slow process. But this last year of her kind of dwindling away was highly traumatic. And and I realized there was a deep part of that was because of the Christianity, because I thought because she was not a practicing Christian, of course, she was going to a fiery place of death and hell and damnation and she was going to be tormented the rest of her life. So that ate at me the whole year she was dying. So every time I went to visit with her, it was really tough. It would be nothing like I am now. Like where I am now, I would be kind of like a shepherd into the afterlife. Like, Mom, it's going to be so much fun. You're going to be out of pain. Like it's going to be like taking off a tight shoe. Like I'd be a completely different person. But that was not the case at the time. And so after she passed, and I was still this practicing Christian, I just realized like, I don't feel like this is correct. She was a nice person. She had her issues, of course, but she was a kind, wonderful person. And there is just no way that they're correct and that she is in this fiery afterlife. So that's when transition started happening. And once I started questioning myself and my beliefs, not only my beliefs in Christianity as an adult, but my childhood beliefs that were placed in me that, like I'm not good enough. I'm not, my parents didn't place any beliefs in me that I was anything. So I looked for the world to that, and the world told me I was nothing. So once you started questioning those beliefs and those adult beliefs, those childhood beliefs, things started changing. I started meditating. I saw a shaman instead of a pastor, and things started changing. I had what I can only explain as a bliss attack around this time. This is about 4 years ago. And this bliss attack is much like a panic attack if you replace panic with love. So for 3 hours, I was just these waves of love and these amazing thoughts were coming to me at the same time. So I had this amazing feeling, and then I had these thoughts coming in at the same time, which I knew to be true because of how I was feeling. And I knew in that moment that I had been placed on airplane mode my whole life. Like I think all children are off airplane mode, but airplane mode gets turned on in them all around, 6, 8, 9, somewhere around there. And when they, start believing that they can't do something. And in this moment, airplane mode was turned off. And I realized that most of society is on airplane mode. And that my new mission at this point was to try to, like, that whole raise the consciousness thing, like, get people off of airplane mode. Because you don't know what you don't know. And so after that, I still experienced a lot of things that I had to go through at that time. But in the past 2 years, things have especially turned around. And, I wrote the book. I have this kind of new mission and this new kind of goal of life and all this amazing stuff that's happening. And it's all because of that moment, this kind of turn off of airplane mode moment. So that's kind of the long and short of it. More long, I guess.
Okay. Now, this bliss attack that you're describing, did you do something before this happened? Or how did this come about for you?
Yeah. So that's the most fun thing to talk about. So the bliss attack happened because I started breaking down. I started doing a lot of meditation. At the moment, I was not meditating. So this bliss attack came on out of nowhere. It was after just a gym workout, and I had just come home and I was stretching, and it came on out of absolutely nowhere, middle of the day, no reason. There was no drugs, alcohol. There's a lot of drugs and alcohol in my history, but there was none at this time. I was, like 3-4 weeks clean. And that's the craziest part. It's like this felt like a crazy kind of hybrid ketamine like acid kind of feeling trip, but without those drugs. This is the craziest part. But what I was doing at the time was I was meditating, even though I wasn't meditating at the moment. I was doing a lot of meditating, and I was doing a lot of deconstructing of my shadow. which I speak about it in the book, that, shadow work. And, the shadow is this part of our personality that, we may not enjoy so much. It's composed of a lot of limiting beliefs and childhood traumas, or just traumas in general. And it gets stored in our subconscious and then comes out at these random times. And if we're not, aware of it, it can rule our lives. And so I was doing a lot of shadow work, which is the first rung in my kind of 13 rungs. So the shadow work and the meditation, that's what I was working on at the time when this came on. And the reason I wrote it, like this all came together, was because it was this signal that was like, put this together so that other people can have a bliss attack. And this is kind of, 13 rungs to have your own bliss attack.
No, that I like that. Okay. And so did you know back then, you said that the bliss attack was about 4 years ago. Did you know then that you would write this book?
No. So when I had the bliss attack, it was life-changing. I knew at that moment life was going to be different. But, you kind of come out of this the next day, and like a couple of days later, I had dinner with my family, and I just told them, I was like, as best as I could, everything is different right now. Like, I don't know what happened. I can't explain it. I don't know why it happened. There's no reason for it, but everything is different. And that's just where it stopped and ended. And it was 2 years after that, I still went through some stuff, and there was still some traumas I went through in those 2 years that really brought me to my knees. I mean, including, I had an ex-fiance that decided to move across the country and then cut me out of our life and our infant son. So we had an infant son together, and she decided to move across the country and just cut me out. And so those things, they really, it's not to say, woe's me or anything. It's just those things really bring you to your knees. And they're just things that, that really, make you question. And so at that time, I moved up to Sedona, which here in Arizona is, really worldwide, it's kind of like a spiritual mecca, right? Like, I just felt drawn to Sedona. And after that whole event happened, she moved away, and she took him, there's just not a lot legal I could do when she's half country away. So it just was something I had to accept at the time, and still accept now. I believe that it's something that could change in the future, but it is what it is right now. But when that happened, I moved to Sedona, and the first thing I did was go to Bell Rock, which is a big energy vortex up there, and just put out to the universe that, things are really not going so great right now, right? Like things are not as I'd like them to be. So why is that? Like, show me where to go. What do I do? And that was the intention I placed on being there. And in about 6 months later, that's when the book came to mind, and a clear vision of where everything is going to go came to mind. And so it's, intention, which is another wrong. Attention to intention is a big deal. A big deal. Yeah.
I like that. Attention to intention.
Yep. Yeah. There's 13 of them. So Sorcery, it's spelled with a U. First of all, it's Sorcery 101. It's a book. It's out. You can go to Amazon or awakenthesorcerer.com. It's around, and I'm kind of hoping it's the seed that kind of plants the career tree, as it will. But there's 13 of them because Sorcery, first of all, is spelled with the U because it's not about wizards and cauldrons and Eye of Newt. It's about source energy. That is what we're using to heal and manifest a better life. Like, to heal from our previous trauma and get a better life. And you're using source energy. So SOURCE. So source. So Sorcery 101 and 13 rungs. When I was healing, I kind of thought, I had all this stuff in my mind. When I placed all this stuff out to the universe, it was like, what do I do and where do I go? So I had to have a clear way of constructing all this stuff that was in my head. I had a lot of jumbled craziness. So source energy, that energy that explaining source energy to a human is like explaining water to a fish. So it would be pretty difficult, right? Like if you explain water to a fish, it, like, well, it surrounds you, it's everywhere. You wouldn't be alive without water. And the fish still wouldn't understand. Like the fish still wouldn't understand, but that's the same thing for it is for us. So that sort of source energy is what I tapped into to kind of create this book. It's ancient wisdom. It's the unified field. It's the quantum field. It is a field that can be tapped into by anyone at any time. We are all open to it. You just have to know how to turn off your airplane mode, right? And it's there. And once you tap into it, you can never turn off your airplane mode. You can't turn it back off. That's the deal with it. Like you can try, like I did for a couple of years. Like I can try it, but you can never turn it back off. So this source energy, this energy field is there. And that is what I tapped into. So it's an ancient wisdom that's been around since the beginning of time. And it's simply, I tapped into it. It used my subconscious, my actions, my experience, my history, my humor, and came up with this book. And so there's 13 rungs because, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for quite a while, as I said. They have that 12 steps, and which is fine, but they're very rigid. Okay, they're very rigid. They're like, you do this a certain way. Like this is how you, just like religion. So like religion is very rigid, and I just feel like religion is kind of archaic. And the problem with religion is that there's so much focus on control that they lose the good stuff. Every religion has this good stuff around it, but then there's all these rules and dogma and garbage that seems to get the focus. And then they're being able to controlled by fear. Fear and shame are very easily controlled. So, I lost a tangent there, but it's just one of the things that I get kind of passionate about because I understand now that you can take all the amazing parts of each religion and throw away all the laws and dogma and be spiritual. That's the difference between spiritual and religion. And so this whole book came from that. And so there are 13 rungs, and there's 13 for specific reason. 13 in our culture is considered very unlucky. So I did 13 because it is actually not unlucky. We have a lot of false beliefs and a lot of things that are placed in us as a society that get programmed into us that we think are bad. And the number 13 is a great example of that. So 13 in tarot actually means death, rebirth, and transformation. It is actually a divine number and very lucky. But if you ask the person on the street, it's unlucky. It's Friday the 13th. There's no 13 floors on hotels. There's ridiculousness surrounding 13, but it's all for nothing. It's superstition. So immediately, I wanted people to start thinking and questioning their beliefs, their limiting beliefs immediately. So that's why I made 13 rungs, because we have to start questioning the things we think are real. That's the biggest part of becoming a sorcerer.
What would you suggest as the first step for somebody to turn off the airplane mode?
Well, the book is a good place to start. Certainly. I also offer one-on-one sessions, which is a lot of fun for me because they say iron sharpens iron. No one person is sharpening the other. So this is what I'm meant to do, because me helping others is helping my spiritual journey, which is just a massive blessing. So I do offer that, sorcerer13@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me. But there's that, and then the book itself. But the first thing is to get to know your shadow. That's the biggest one. Meditation and the shadow, which is what I mentioned in the first. Those are the first two rungs, and they're there for a reason. They're all equally as important. My 13 rungs are like 12 steps where they're rigid and you have to do them one by one and in order, and you can't skip, and they're very fluid. You can go between them. But the first two, between the shadow and the meditation, those two are really good place to start. So those are the places I can kind of get into it too if you want to, but those are the two places I would say to the very beginning to start with, that shadow work and meditation.
And when you say shadow work, what do you mean by shadow work?
Yeah, so this was a term coined by Carl Jung. So the shadow is essentially the part of us that's the subconscious part of us. So if you think of the iceberg model, right, you only see 10%. The Titanic only saw that small percentage of the iceberg as they were going by, but there was 90% is hidden below the surface. It's actually massive. And that is the subconscious versus the conscious. They say we only use 10% of our brains, which isn't really true. We use our whole brains, but it is a way to say that there's the subconscious versus the conscious. And that's kind of what that's supposed to mean. It's just got kind of misinterpreted over the years. But the shadow is the subconscious. And so many people are just not programmed correctly. We are all walking program. And once we understand that, it gets better to see human behavior, understand human behavior. We have a easier way to not react to it. Once you realize that everyone is just a walking program. So the shadow, for people that were not programmed correctly, and a lot of this is childhood. There's a lot that comes in before the age of 7. And there are people out there that had great families and had perfect programming. And maybe you don't have, everyone has a shadow, but it may be dormant. So, those that were raised in a great atmosphere and found a great partner and have children, you're loving your life, well done, keep going. But you're one trauma away from your shadow approaching. So everyone has the shadow, it just may be dormant. For those of us that did not have that growing up or nice things in childhood or adulthood, we have this critic to deal with. And it's just made up of our childhood traumas and limiting beliefs and all that stuff. But it is not us. So we are the awareness of the shadow, not the shadow itself. So people mine manifested in the way of drug and alcohol addictions and things like that. And others can manifest in especially anger, people with anger issues. So that's the shadow. All of a sudden, there's someone that flips you off on the freeway. And I'm not saying you, but there's someone that flips someone off on the freeway, and that someone will attach the anger that they have towards their father leaving when they were a child to that middle finger on the freeway and go chase that person on the freeway. And you'll see Yahoo news of this, that, someone was shot on the freeway from road rage attack. Well, that had nothing to do with someone flipping you off on the freeway, because they've attached their trauma to that middle finger, and now they've chased it off there and they're going after that person. And so that is the shadow. And that is something that is critically important to deal with. And like everyone has one. So the way I deal with mine, so big into pop culture. So pop culture is a big part of the book. There's a lot of it in there. But the person that deals with their shadow in a really healthy way, Eminem. So Eminem, if you think about it, he has separated himself from this shadow. He calls it Slim Shady. He is, there's Marshall and there's Slim Shady. They're two separate entities. And he is able to deal with it in a healthy way. He raps, and in the way he gets it out in a healthy way without these feelings becoming actions. Because, thought becomes a feeling, becomes an action. So he deals with it in the way of like, okay, thought, feeling, all right, I'm gonna spew this out as Slim Shady and be someone else and get it out. And that's how I'm going to deal with my shadow. And so if we all could learn how to deal with our shadows in a similar way, we'd be much better off. Whether it's going to a boxing gym, his way is to spew it out verbally, but we can get it out in a boxing, there's just ways to get it out and to understand that's not us. And so that's one of the things I recommend to people is to name your shadow. Like he did Slim Shady, name it and know when it's coming up, because it will come up and it will kind of manifest in certain ways. And if you name it and you're separating yourself from it, you do not have to, you are no longer a slave to the shadow, because we have a society driven by people with shadow driven people. I like to say there's 3 positions for the shadow. Okay. If you're driving a car, your shadow is either driving the car, it's in the passenger seat, or it's in the back seat. If it's driving the car, these are the people that are homeless and they're struggling, and they can't hold down jobs, they can't hold down apartments. Their lives are like mine was in my 20s, a dumpster fire. My shadow's been east position in the car. That's why I know this. So, if it's in the driver's seat, it's always going to drive off the cliff. It's automatically going to want to drive off a cliff every time. If your shadow is driving the car, it's going to want to drive off a cliff. If you move it to the passenger seat, well, at least it's not driving. So now these are people and I've been in this point in my life where this is kind of the mediocrity stage, where things are fine. I had a job, I had an apartment, but I couldn't hold on relationships. I couldn't understand women. I didn't understand, I had no understanding of how to have any sort of healthy relationship with people at all. So this is when the shadow's in the passenger seat. So it's still too involved, right? It's talking to you. It's still too involved. And so where you want to move it to, it is in the backseat. And the people that go for greatness and have, clear goals and experience amazing things in their lives, their shadows in their backseat, not out of the car. You can't kick it out of the car. And you cannot fight your shadow or hate it, because now you're just producing the same energy that the shadow wants. So you cannot hate the shadow or fight it. You have to love your shadow. I call my shadow Floyd because, again, pop culture, the 1993 classic True Romance, Brad Pitt plays a small cameo character named Floyd. And in that movie, he's basically a couch dweller. He doesn't, the main character in the movie, he doesn't pay rent. He doesn't do chores. He just smokes weed and sits on the couch all day. But the main character that lets him stay there because he loves him like a brother, and he's not going to kick him out. He just lets him stay. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do chores. He does nothing, but he loves him. So he just lets him stay. So that's my shadow. So I named him Floyd. And so my shadow is this kind of couch dweller. He doesn't add a lot to my life, but I love him like a brother. So I have to let him stay, let him chill on my couch, hang out, and I'll give him some popcorn and check in on him and see how he's doing. But that's the best way to deal with your shadow. And that is the number one thing I would say to people that are trying to make a change. Separate yourself from the shadow and the divine. I like to say I'm a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac, right? And that is the separation of the shadow and the divine. And we have it all in us. We have this. There are no good or bad people. There are only just people deciding to either feed their dark wolves or the light. And that's what happened. So that is the number one thing I would say to people, is to start respecting your shadow.
I really like that, how you name it. Even just listening to you talk about it, it makes so much sense, as it's like a separate entity. When you give it a name, you are creating a full separate identity for it. So it's not attached to you. It's not a part of you, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it's the best way, because it is not, that the shadow was created out of a need, which is why it shouldn't be anything bad, or it was created out of a need at a time that it should be respected, and it's there. But if you don't know it's there, that's when it rules your life. Because if you're not aware of it, it's ruling your life. And, people in my 20s was wondering why my life was a dumpster fire. It was because I didn't know my shadow. I didn't understand it. I didn't have any idea what that was or what it consisted of. Nothing. But it is not us. It was created, people that see the whole Karen thing, right? Like that in my, honestly, like my heart goes out to anyone actually named Karen because like, holy shit, you must be going through a lot right now. Like, oh my God. But that whole phenomenon, right, is from the shadow. It is like these people and they get caught and I feel so bad for them because they get caught in these bad moments where their shadow just erupts, like in these situations where like, whoa, this reaction is way beyond what it should be. Well, that's the shadow reacting to something that isn't actually there. Their shadow, these quote Karens, right? Like they're not reacting to the situation that is at hand, which is generally, like a fast food joint or something. They're not reacting to that. They're reacting to their father that left when they were a kid or their mother that used to abuse them, like that. And that's what people don't understand. And there needs to be some sympathy for these people in order for them to get better. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to see that because then, especially with social media, it gets splashed all over people with their shadows, their shadow coming out. And now it's splashed all over social media. And it's like, God, that sucks. But it should have an emphasis even stronger. Like you can heal that shadow and that doesn't have to happen because the miracle happens is when you're in a situation like that and you react in a very calm and normal way and you think to yourself, boy, that wasn't me. like when the healing happens, like that's what happens is you're in these situations that you start becoming conscious of yourself. And it's like, wow, I wouldn't have reacted that way at all. And so that's when you start doing the work. And it is work. I don't like to scare people away and say that it's really hard work to do all this and this. But like in the military, they say embrace the suck, right? Like, so it's a matter of my 14-year-old nephew, love that kid. So he'll get one of these, I think his newest thing is like this Lego Death Star, right? So like a Lego Death Star. Imagine what that would look like on the floor, like put out. That's pretty intimidating for most people. And he puts it out and he has like 20,000 Lego pieces and he's excited. Most people, this would be daunting, but he embraces the challenge. And that's the biggest part to changing in health and like wanting to be better is to embrace the suck, take on the challenge and make it something cool and exciting like he does. Because I wouldn't be any better. I'd see 20,000 Lego pieces and say, no, screw that, I'm out. But he looks at it and is like, no, let's do this. This is going to be fun. Let's go. So that's the kind of enthusiasm people need to have in terms of change because it's a really exciting when it happens.
I get that. You mentioned a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac. How so?
Well, that's the two sides of me, right? Like it's the reactionary. So the shadow reacts, the sorcerer responds. So Deepak, Tupac, it's the sorcerer and the shadow. There's two sides of us. And I put that as me. I embrace both sides. I've had times where I was very much that reactionary side. And it didn't lead to very good things, certainly. So, to live in, and, the Native Americans say we have two wolves living in us. It's the light wolf and the dark wolf. And the wolf we feed the most is the one that takes over. So for me, when I was feeding that dark wolf, the drugs and alcohol, just those things, it made my life just a complete hellfire, awful, like craziness. And things were really bad. I say Deepak, Tupac, things didn't end too well for Tupac, did it? He had a very reactionary side, and it was very obvious when you go back and look at it, he had that shadow, and his shadow was controlling his life. It was making he was in and out of jail, and he could not get in control of his shadow. And then you have kind of the Deepak side. That's the divine side of us, that we're just embracing this like source energy. And, Deepak Chopra has 95 books now. Are you kidding me? Like, who writes 95 books? Get out of here. So that's the possibility that we're all capable of that stuff. And, we're all capable of anything. And it could be capable of the worst, the best of the best. It's just a matter of belief. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Now, you mentioned you embrace both sides. Is there something that helped you be able to do that?
Yeah. I mean, once I started realizing that fighting my shadow was not working. That's when things started to change. So I started to understand that embracing my shadow and kind of checking in on it and putting it in the back seat kind of thing, and just checking on it, making sure it's doing okay. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that, if you keep that shadow in check, and it's kind of part of your inner child, and that scared inner child, and if you're talking to it and keeping it in check, good things can happen. But if you try to fight it, a lot of things say fight your dragons and fight the demons. They're talking about that kind of subconscious. But if you're fighting, fighting for peace is like shouting for silence. It just gives you more of what you don't want, right? So if you start to embrace your shadow and just accept it for what it is and know that it's there instead of fighting it, because what it wants is a fight. Just like with humans out there, there's a lot of joy thieves. That whole joy thief, they don't have any joy. So they're out to take yours. So they're going to be dicks and assholes, and they're going to try to take your joy. Well, it is up to you if you want to give your joy away or not. And that is the same with the shadow. The shadow is a joy thief. So, but it is up to you if you want to give away your joy, because it is your joy and you get to keep it if you want to, or you can give it away. And so that's a big word it came from, is just kind of this. I kept giving my joy away to my shadow and trying to fight my shadow, when the reality is that's what it wants. Just like that drunk guy at the ballpark that wants a fight, like you see these on video all the time. They want to fight. So like they want to take your joy. And what pisses them off more is if you give them a big hug. Can you imagine like someone who wants to fight you over you and you give them a big hug? Like, that's not what they want at all. That's basically a punch in the face. That's probably even stronger than a punch in the face for someone who wants to fight. Because if you just like say, here, I think you need a hug. And that's what it came down to with the shadow, was like, let's stop arguing. I think you need a hug. That's kind of where it came down to.
I love that analogy, that example, like the mean guy at the ballpark. You think he needs a hug. No, I love that. I love that. Wow. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the way you explained it, by like really separating the shadow to be a separate person, makes it a whole different situation.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of the key to healing. That's why you asked what's the first thing people can do. That's the first thing. Get acquainted with your shadow and start to become friends with it. Name it. Start to become friends with it and understand it's not you.
It's not you. That makes so much sense. Thank you so much, Justin.
No problem at all. It's been a blast.
Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I always ask. Some people have, it's either of course, or people have no idea who I'm speaking about. I'm a big fan. He's got a podcast called On Purpose, and he ends it with 2 segments, and I end my podcast with those 2 segments as well. First segment is the many sides to us, and there's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Maybe the first time to Ish. Like, ugh.
What is 1 word Someone that knows you extremely well would use to describe you as.
Fun.
What is one word you'd use to describe yourself?
Inspirational.
What is one word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Probably douche.
What is one word you're trying to embody right now?
Holistic.
Second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Probably, so live life like it's your first day, not your last.
Why is that the best advice?
Because so if you think about it, so someone like myself, a last day consists of, I don't know, me getting up. I'm not going to do my yoga or meditation. I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm not going to do any sort of routine that I've created. There's a good chance I'll end up at a bar hitting on a woman, and then I might end up robbing a pharmacy because it's my last day. Like, who cares? Like that's probably going to end up being my last day. But if it's my first day, now we're building something towards the future. Now we're like, okay, let's do things. Let's create healthy habits. Let's work towards the future. Let's find this curiosity. If it's your first day, you're kind of curious about things. What is this world? What is this like? So having that curiosity and having the idea of this, we're in it for the long haul is much, much healthier for me than living life like it's your last day. Because for someone like me, where I've come from, it's terrible advice. Live life like it's your last day. Terrible advice.
What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
That has to be it's got to go in together, right? Like that has to be like a 2 for 1. Because the worst, like, I live life like it's your last day. Because like that's not good advice for someone like me. That's just terrible advice. So that has to go 1 and 1 together.
What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
I would say, I used to value just money a lot more than money's very important, and it is something, but it used to be valued in my life much higher than it is now. So I'd go with money.
If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be, as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
I would say that if I could sum up my legacy, I would say that, knowledge comes from books, but wisdom is sourced.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
Oh, that's easy. That's the golden rule. Love others like you treat others like you wish to be treated. Love others like you wish to be loved. That's it. That is the only, there's all these religions and all these things, all these rules and laws and all this garbage. And there's only one law, and that's it. Is treat others how you wish to be treated. Love others how you wish to be loved. And if we all could work on that, everything would be great. Like, we joke about this utopia thing, but we could have a utopia if we all lived by that one law. And that's it. If we just had that one law, things would be a whole lot different in this world.
I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Yeah, no problem. This was a blast.
And I do like to just give it back to the guest. Any final words of wisdom you want to share with the listeners?
Well, like I said before, so you can find me on, I've been on social media for 4 years. I just got back on a couple months ago. I'm on Instagram, Sorcery_13. If you want to find me there. There's the website, which is www.awakenthesorcerer.com, or my email, which is sorcery13@gmail.com. So anything at all, like, I'm around and I love helping people. But the main thing I guess I would leave people with is that just the statement that the journey is the destination. that's what I really like to hammer into people. Like, the journey is the destination. Everyone's always so caught up about that end result. They're not enjoying the moment. So just remember, the journey is the destination.
I love that. It's so true. Well, thank you so much. And I will link all of that in the show notes for people to connect with you directly.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Aho.
How? And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.